Tonight on WFMY News 2 at 11, a very important story. I dig deeper into this number, 15,000. This is the number of untested sexual assault kits left sitting on North Carolina law enforcement shelves as of an inventory last year. I've stayed on top of this problem, and in the year since then, what has happened?
They can only test so many at one time. So what I hope is if the General Assembly gives us the funding that we're going to seek in the upcoming session, that over the next 2 to 3 years, we can eliminate the backlog here in North Carolina.
Wow, 2 to 3 years, a long time for people who wait for the wheels of justice to turn. North Carolina Attorney General Josh Stein has introduced legislation trying to speed up that process. Yet as of now, only a small fraction of those 15,000 kits have been tested. Tonight on WFMY News 2 at 11, I dig deeper into progress made in eliminating that backlog. Before then, I am verifying a piece of the puzzle. What is the problem like on a local level? That inventory from last year revealed 1,339 untested kits in Winston-Salem, 215 in High Point, and 944 in Greensboro. I followed up with Greensboro Police and talked to Public Information Officer Ron Glenn. At last check, he told me there were still those 944 untested kits in GPZ possession dating back to 1983. But Glenn explained those kits did not meet the state's crime lab requirements for testing. They are cases in which the victim wants to remain anonymous, the suspect admits to the sexual act in question, the crime is resolved in court, or further investigation determines the allegations unfounded. Glenn said there is no statute of limitations in North Carolina for felonies. There is no time frame in which law enforcement has to send a kit to the crime lab for testing. That is one of the changes the Attorney General wants to make. He introduced a 45-day window in his recent proposal called the Survivor Act. All that information, just part of the story tonight on WFMY News 2 at 11. As I mentioned, I explained the shockingly low number of cases that have been tested in the past year, and I discussed the all-important solutions in the works. In the meantime, if you have a verifying inquiry, reach out to me, submit a selfie video of the question to my Facebook page, Mega Malaris News, or email or tweet me. Let me get your questions verified.